Let's go to the other big stories of the day. Joining me now, Sky's political editor or contributor, Chris Uhlmann. I only gave you an upgrade there. Andrew Clennell wouldn't be happy about that one. The Australian reports today, Chris, that senior Liberals are in discussions with disgruntled Nats. I'd also say plenty of disgruntled Conservative Liberals as well, to repeal net zero by 2050, but somehow, square this circle for me, retain their commitment to net zero under the Paris Agreement. Now, we don't know when this is going to happen. There's been a roundtable on the issue called for next week in an attempt to bring it all to a head. Honestly, I think this leaves them absolutely half pregnant in policy terms. I mean, if they can't back 2035 targets, how the heck can they back out anything beyond then? And 2050, well, that's a nonsense.
Yeah, Peter, look, the only thing you can say is if you stand in the middle of the road, you will get run down, and that's the position that the Liberals find themselves in at the moment. Of course, there is tension with the coalition partner, the Nationals, and I would say that the likely thing is that the Nationals will dump net zero, and then it will be a question of what the Liberal Party does, and can the National Party live with whatever it is the Liberal Party does do, and that is yet to be settled. Like, there are some people who are very hard against net zero inside the Liberal Party room, but there are quite a few who aren't, and they want to make some kind of settlement with that because they're terrified about what might happen in those teal seats and other seats like them. But I'd say this, the problem they've had all along is being unable to decide anything and being unable to lead because they want to follow. They're constantly looking at polls and thinks those things can't be shifted. You see polls which do suggest, and I believe this, that 60, 70, 80% of the population have a sentiment which is, we want to do something for the environment. Net zero is that something. Not 1 in 1,000 could tell you what that is. And I guarantee you, 99 out of 100 do not want to pay money for it. So once that equation changes over time, as it will, the Liberal Party might find itself stranded because it didn't take a stand when one was on offer. And events, I think, will change in the next 2.5 years as the world changes.
I think it's intellectually fraudulent, though, to acknowledge, as we all do, that 2030 targets will not and cannot be met, and that's even the government saying that. So 2035, the coalition's already said, well, we're not going to adopt those because they're so far off where we're tracking. If you can't have 35, as I say, how do you have 2040 and how do you have 2050? So it's intellectually fraudulent. It's engineeringly impossible to agree to all of that and still hang on to this idea, this aspirational principle of net zero, in the Paris Agreement. And as to your point, you rightly say, whatever the polls are, we all want a good environment. That's not just a left position. I think that's a left and a right position. Conservatives are called conservatives because there's things they believe that are worth conserving. The problem is the coalition's not even trying to explain to people the cost of net zero, what it would mean for Australia. And I say this, Chris, you lose 100% of every fight you are not in. If they had the fight, if they had the debate, if they took Australians with them, I think they could turn the tide on the futility of net zero.
Yeah, and there are two things about it which stand out and which should be easy to demonstrate. One is cost. You don't need modelling that's done by the CSIRO because that modelling is being done at a grid scale and the cost is written in your bill. If what the government was doing was bringing electricity prices down, they would not need to subsidise it to the tune of over $6 billion so far and counting. And the other thing is we are going to completely cover the landscape in wind turbines to an extent which I think most Australians have not yet appreciated. But Stephen Nowakowski, who is a genuine Green out of Queensland, has done the mapping.
Yep.
And we do know that the footprint that we're going to see is 1.7 times the size of Tasmania. Now, the government is not denying that because that number also comes out of a separate study which was done by Princeton. So let's see the government maps. So on two fronts, on costs and on whether or not it will be good for the environment, the government fails its own test. Now, if you can't prosecute that case, then God help you.
Let's go to the Chinese fighter jet revelations. It occurred on Sunday. We learned about it yesterday, all timed very conveniently for the US visit by our Prime Minister. These are flares put off by the Chinese military close to an Australian surveillance plane in the South China Sea. Beijing claims they were forced to do this, to take these, what they call powerful countermeasures. We apparently infringed their area and we were provocative, says Beijing. Richard Marles, the Defence Minister, he offered up this pretty meek response today. Have a listen.
Whenever I meet with my counterpart, we raise these issues, and that has been the case when the Chief of the Defence Force was most recently in China. So we take those opportunities. But I would want to be really clear that we now have a very set procedure when incidents of this kind occur.
OK, pilots say this can bring down a plane. But what we got there from the Defence Minister was another sort of wet lettuce response because it's China, because we are so tied up in commercial and trade knots with China, we cannot say what we should say when it comes to defence.
Well, China has no qualms in telling us what it thinks and doing what it likes in the South China Sea. And let's underline this point. That what happened in international airspace. It's not Chinese airspace. It's not provocative to do what we are doing there. And China essentially is in conflict with a range of countries in that space. It wants to normalise this process. It wants to drive us out of an area that crosses through our major trade routes. And if we are pushed back by them, if we allow this bullying to continue, if we continue to take backward steps, then that's what they're hoping for. This is not, as I see, said, unprofessional behaviour. This was dangerous behaviour. This is life-threatening behaviour. This is an act of aggression by another country in an international airspace, and it should be called out as such. But, Peter, we do seem to believe that we can dance between raindrops with China, and I think even the Chinese are beginning to work out that Australia says one thing and does another. They're talking about our foreign policy as being two-faced. I think the Americans might feel a little bit about that way about us too at the moment. So I think you've got to be a bit careful in trying to essentially walk both sides of the street, that neither side in the end is going to believe the things that you say.
Chris, I want to get to your secret project in a moment because it's not going to be secret after we talk about it. But, I mean, this is probably why I think, and we got this news slip out today, a $500 million loan is going to go from us to PNG. This is the sixth such massive multi-million-dollar loan that we've given PNG. The IMF says, look, they're a high-risk debtor. I don't think we're ever going to get this money back. This feels like, a couple of weeks ago when they were not going to sign the deal and they were running off to China, that we've basically had an extortion bid here. Pay us another loan and we'll sign the deal. Well, we did get it signed, sure, but now we're being told it's going to cost us $500 million. This is what it was really all about.
Yeah, $500 million a year for the last 5 years, Peter. So we're talking about $3 billion now, and the International Monetary Fund has warned that PNG's finances are in such bad shape that it could default on loans like that. But I think the entire Pacific now has the message that all you have to do with Australia and the United States is to start saying, oh, well, we might wander off into the arms of China and you can play both sides against the middle. And in the end, unfortunately, what's happening in the Pacific is it's much easier for China to simply buy politicians. Like, we try to buy favour, we try to get them to sign up to agreements with us by giving them money and hope that they spend it wisely and try to police the way they spend it. It's much easier for the Chinese simply to hand over bagfuls of cash.
And we know in a lot of these countries it goes to political individuals.